You might think you know US geography, but I guarantee it's weirder and more fascinating than you realize. If you want to impress your friends at your next gathering, here are 25 mind-blowing facts about the geography of the United States that you need to know. But first, if you love learning about the most unbelievable places on Earth, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on our latest videos. So let's dive right in. At number 1, Texas is bigger than most European countries. You might already know that Texas is a really big state. It's the second largest state in the United States, and it covers 268,597 square miles, or 695,662 square kilometers, making it larger than France, Spain, Sweden, and even the United Kingdom. That's how big Texas is. You could actually fit the United Kingdom inside Texas almost 4 times. In fact, Texas is bigger than every country in Europe except Russia. But that's no surprise, since Russia is the biggest country in the entire world. At number 2, Las Vegas is one of the brightest places on Earth. Las Vegas isn't just famous for its casinos. The city is so bright it can be seen from space. The Las Vegas Strip is packed with neon lights and giant LED screens, making it one of the most illuminated places on the planet. The glow is so intense that astronauts in orbit can see it shining in the middle of the Nevada desert. From the iconic Sphere to the massive Luxor skybeam, which shoots the brightest light on Earth straight into the sky, Vegas is truly a city that never goes dark. At number 3, the flattest state in the US is Florida. While Kansas has a popular reputation for being the flattest state, the real title actually goes to Florida. How flat are we talking? Well, the highest natural point in Florida, Britton Hill, stands at just 345 feet or 105 meters above sea level. That's only around the same height as the Statue of Liberty. On the other hand, the highest point in Kansas is Mount Sunflower. Although it's more of a hill than a mountain, at 4,039 feet or 1,231 meters, it is 10 times taller than Florida's highest point. To put it in perspective, even Disney World's fake mountains like Expedition Everest are taller than Florida's highest natural point. At number 4, there is a U.S. town that is split between 2 countries. In Derby Line, Vermont, the U.S.-Canada border runs straight through homes, streets, and even a library. One of the most famous examples is the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, which is split between Vermont and Quebec, with its entrance in the US and most of the building in Canada. Inside, a black line marks the border, meaning you can technically walk between the 2 countries without going through customs. Some homes and businesses even have 2 addresses, one for each country. While this once made cross-border visits incredibly easy, today strict security measures and surveillance cameras ensure that international crossings follow the rules. Still, it's fascinating to think that in some places, crossing a border is as simple as taking a single step. At number 5, the tallest mountain on Earth is in the US. Now, this might come as a surprise to most people because you might have heard that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. Well, actually, Mount Everest is the highest peak above sea level, but it's not the tallest mountain on Earth. That title belongs to Mauna Kea in Hawaii. While Everest stands at 29,032 feet or 8,849 meters above sea level, Mauna Kea reaches 33,500 feet or 10,200 meters from its base on the ocean floor, which makes it taller than Everest. But because most of it is underwater, it doesn't get the same fame as Everest. But in terms of sheer height from base to peak, Mauna Kea is the real giant of the planet. At number 6, Tornado Alley experiences the highest frequency of tornadoes in the world. There are no officially set boundaries for Tornado Alley, but the region stretches across much of the central United States, covering Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. The US gets about 1,200 tornadoes per year, far more than any other country. The reason for this is that the warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico collides with cold, dry air from Canada, creating the perfect conditions for violent storms and tornadoes. Some of the strongest tornadoes ever recorded have touched down here, reaching wind speeds of over 300 miles per hour. leveling entire towns in minutes. If you live in Tornado Alley, sirens and storm shelters are just a part of life, and if you ever visit during storm season, keep an eye on the sky. At number 7, Montana has more cows than people. Montana is known for its rugged landscapes and wide open spaces, but here's a fun fact. Cows outnumber people by more than 2 to 1. With a population of just over 1 million people, Montana is home to around 2.5 million cattle. That means for every person, there are 2.5 cows roaming the vast plains and rolling hills. If cattle had their own state, they would easily outnumber humans in Montana. Ranching has been a way of life in Montana for generations, with vast open plains and rolling pastures making it an ideal place for cattle to roam. The state's beef industry is a major economic driver, and cattle outnumber people in most rural counties. So if you ever find yourself in Montana, don't be surprised if you see more cows than humans. It's just part of the state's wide open ranching culture. At number 8, you can stand in 4 states at once. There's only one place in the entire US where you can stand in 4 states at the same time. The Four Corners is where Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado all meet at a perfect 90-degree angle. Tourists love visiting the Four Corners Monument, stretching their arms and legs in different directions to be in all 4 states at once. But here's a fun twist. The original survey that placed the marker was slightly off. While the monument is still recognized as the official Four Corners, the actual intersection is a few hundred feet away. Still, it's the only place in the US where you can spin in a circle and visit 4 states in seconds. At number 9, the US Virgin Islands is the only place in the US where you drive on the left. If you ever visit the US Virgin Islands, be prepared for a driving experience unlike anywhere else in the country, because the United States Virgin Islands is the only place under United States jurisdiction where the rule of the road is to drive on the left, despite being a US territory for over 100 years. The reason? It dates back to the days when Denmark controlled the islands before selling them to the US in 1917. But here's where it gets tricky. Most cars in the Virgin Islands are imported from the US, meaning they have left-hand steering wheels designed for right-side driving. That makes for an unusual and sometimes confusing experience for visitors. At number 10, the Everglades in Florida is the only place in the world where alligators and crocodiles coexist. Yes, in the entire world. The Everglades in Florida is the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles live side by side in the wild. Alligators prefer freshwater swamps and rivers, while crocodiles thrive in saltwater or brackish coastal areas. But here, their worlds overlap, creating a unique ecosystem. Despite their similarities, they behave differently. Alligators are more territorial, while crocodiles tend to avoid conflict. This one-of-a-kind ecosystem is also home to manatees, panthers, and invasive Burmese pythons. The Everglades has access to saltwater, freshwater, and brackish water, so American alligators and crocodiles can both spend time in various water habitats. At number 11, Alaska is so massive, it's bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Alaska is by far the largest state in the US, covering 663,268 square miles, or 1.72 million square kilometers, making up 1/5 of the entire contiguous United States. It's bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Yet, despite its size, it has one of the smallest populations, with some areas having more bears than people. Alaska also has more coastline than the rest of the US combined, and more than half of the world's glaciers are in Alaska. Over 100,000 glaciers cover 5% of the state. With its towering monuments, endless wilderness, and record-breaking glaciers, Alaska isn't just the biggest state, it's one of the most breathtaking places on Earth. At number 12, only 2 US states don't share a border with any other state. The US is full of interesting border quirks, but only 2 states stand completely alone: Hawaii and Alaska. Hawaii is an island paradise in the Pacific, while Alaska is separated from the rest of the US by Canada, making it an isolated giant. But here's another interesting border fact. Maine is the only state in the lower 48 that shares a border with just one other state, New Hampshire. Every other state has at least 2 neighbors. On the other hand, Missouri and Tennessee share borders with the most states, each touching 8 different states. Missouri borders Nebraska, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, and Kentucky, while Tennessee borders Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, and Kentucky. At number 13, there's a town in the US that has been burning for over 60 years. Centralia, Pennsylvania has had an underground coal fire raging since 1962, when a landfill fire accidentally ignited a coal seam beneath the town. Despite numerous attempts to extinguish it, the fire remains unstoppable, fueled by vast coal deposits, and experts believe it can continue burning for another 250 years. As the fire spread, it released toxic gases, caused roads to crack open with steaming vents, and led to dangerous sinkholes swallowing parts of the town. By the 1980s, Centralia was deemed unsafe, and most residents were forced to evacuate. Buildings were demolished, and by the 1990s, the once thriving town was nearly abandoned. Yet, despite the apocalyptic landscape, a handful of determined residents refused to leave. As of 2025, only 5 people still live in this ghostly, smoldering wasteland. At number 14, Maine is closer to Africa than Florida. It sounds crazy, but it's true. Maine is actually closer to Africa than Florida is. At first glance, it seems like Florida, being much farther south, should be the closest US state to Africa. But thanks to the curvature of the Earth and the positioning of the continents, the closest point to Africa is actually in Maine, specifically a peninsula called Quadi Head. The distance between Quadi Head and El Batouja in Morocco is about 3,154 miles, or 5,076 kilometers, which is shorter than the 3,300-mile or 5,310 kilometer stretch from Florida's closest point. At number 15, Mackinac Island, Michigan, has been car-free since 1898. Imagine a place in the US where cars are completely banned. That's exactly how life has been on Mackinac Island, Michigan since 1898. Instead of vehicles, people get around by walking, biking, or taking horse-drawn carriages, giving the island a charming, old-world atmosphere. The car ban started because early automobiles spooked the horses, and over a century later, the rule still stands. The only exceptions? Emergency vehicles and snowmobiles in winter. Other than that, if you want to get somewhere, you're traveling the old-fashioned way. Mackinac Island is like a time capsule, with historic buildings, scenic lake views, and streets where the loudest sound you'll hear is the clip-clop of horse hooves. At number 16, Alaska is the most earthquake-prone state in the US. When it comes to earthquakes, no state shakes things up quite like Alaska. Experiences more earthquakes than any other US state, around 1,000 per month and over 24,000 per year. There were 39,836 seismic events in Alaska and nearby regions in 2024, according to the Alaska Earthquake Center. In fact, 3 of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded in North America happened in Alaska, including the 1964 Great Alaska Earthquake, which had a magnitude of 9.2. The second largest earthquake in world history. This seismic activity happens because Alaska sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where massive tectonic plates are constantly shifting. Despite all this movement, Alaska's vast wilderness means that most of these earthquakes usually go unnoticed by people. At number 17, the US-Canada border is the longest international border in the world. The US and Canada border stretches 5,525 miles, or 8,891 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, and even into the Arctic. It winds through forests, mountains, and lakes, creating some of the most unique border crossings in the world. Despite its massive length, much of the border is undefended and unmarked, with some roads and towns literally split between the two countries. And then there's the famous slash border, a 20-foot wide cleared strip of land that cuts through forests and hills, creating a visible line between the two nations. Maintained by the International Boundary Commission, this treeless gap ensures the border remains clearly marked at all times. Number 18. The US has a place where you can travel through time by stepping across an island. Diomede Islands, a pair of remote landmasses in the Bering Strait, lie between the United States and Russia. Big Diomede, owned by Russia, and Little Diomede, part of the US, are incredibly close, just 2.4 miles or 3.8 kilometers apart. However, they sit on opposite sides of the international dateline, resulting in a staggering 20-hour time difference. From one island, you can quite literally see into the future by looking at the other. Because of this unique time gap, Big Diomede is often referred to as Tomorrow Island, while Little Diomede is known as Yesterday Island. That means when it's Monday on Russia's Big Diomede, it's still Sunday on America's Little Diomede. If you could walk across the water, you'd literally be stepping back in time. At number 19, nearly half of the US is completely uninhabited. Despite having over 330 million people, much of the US remains empty, with approximately 80% of Americans living in the eastern part of the US, primarily because of the concentration of cities, economic opportunities, and historical factors. The US spans over 3.6 million square miles, or 9.5 million square kilometers, but much of this land is dominated by rugged mountains, arid deserts, and dense forests. For example, the Rocky Mountains, stretching from Canada to New Mexico, create a natural barrier to large-scale settlement. Alaska is the least densely populated state in the US, with only 1.3 people per square mile. States like Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota are so wide that you can drive for miles without seeing a single town. At number 20, New York City is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Speaking of population, there are currently only 9 cities in the US with a population over 1 million people. They are New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, Philadelphia, San Antonio, San Diego, and Dallas. Since 1790, when the first US Census was conducted, New York City has held the title as the most populated city in the United States. In that initial census, New York City had 33,131 people. Today, it is home to more than 8.5 million people. That is more than double the second largest city, Los Angeles, and triple the third largest city, Chicago. New York City has more people than Switzerland, Israel, or Austria. If it were a US state, it would rank 12th, ahead of Virginia. And that's just the city itself, not even counting the millions more in the surrounding metro area. With that many people packed into the city, it's no wonder NYC is called the city that never sleeps. At number 21, the largest underground lake in the US is hidden in Tennessee. Ben Sands, a 13-year-old boy, discovered the Lost Sea in 1905 while exploring a cave. Crawling through a small opening, he found a vast chamber where his lantern couldn't reach the edges. To gauge its size, he threw mud balls and heard splashes, realizing it was filled with water. When he shared his discovery, people were hesitant to believe him, and by the time Ben convinced his father to go back down with him to explore further, the water level had risen, hiding the cave entrance from them. It was rediscovered several years later by local explorers. Once thought to be the world's largest underground lake, the Lost Sea remains the largest in the US and the second largest non-subglacial underground lake, after Namibia's Dragon's Breath Cave. At number 22, the Great Lakes hold 21% of the world's fresh water. The Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, form the largest freshwater system on Earth, spanning across 8 U.S. states and Canada. The Great Lakes hold about 90% of the fresh water in the United States and approximately 20% of the world's freshwater supply. These lakes are massive, covering a total area of 246,463 square kilometers, or 95,160 square miles. That means the surface area of the 5 primary lakes combined is roughly equal to the size of the United Kingdom, while the surface area of the entire basin, that is the lakes and the land that they drain, is about the size of the UK and France combined. Lake Michigan is the only one of the Great Lakes that is entirely within the United States. The others form a water boundary between the United States and Canada. At number 23, the U.S. borders 3 different oceans. Did you know that the United States borders not 1, not 2, but 3 different oceans? Most people know about the Atlantic Ocean to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west, but the U.S. also has a coastline along the Arctic Ocean in Alaska. Each of these oceans plays a huge role in shaping the country. The Atlantic has long been a gateway for trade and exploration, connecting the U.S. to Europe and Africa. The Pacific, the largest and deepest ocean, links the U.S. to Asia and is home to some of the country's busiest ports. And up north, the Arctic Ocean, frozen for much of the year, is becoming increasingly important due to melting ice and new shipping routes. With over 12,000 miles or 19,300 kilometers of coastline, these 3 oceans are shaping the future of the country. At number 24, Florida is the golf capital of the U.S. Florida isn't just about beaches and theme parks, it's also the golf capital of the country. With over 1,250 golf courses, Florida has more than any other state. Thanks to its warm, sunny weather year-round, golfers from all over the world come to play at legendary courses like PGA National in Palm Beach or TPC Sawgrass, home of the famous Island Green 17th hole. The state's impact on golf extends beyond its courses. With top-tier training facilities, golf academies, and industry headquarters, Florida plays a vital role in shaping the sport's future. Whether it's for competition, relaxation, or simply enjoying the game in breathtaking surroundings, Florida remains the ultimate destination for golf lovers. Number 25. Michigan has more lighthouses than any other state. Over 3,200 miles or 5,149 kilometers of shoreline along the Great Lakes, Michigan has long been a crucial route for shipping. Sailors navigate these vast and sometimes dangerous waters. The state built over 120 lighthouses, more than any other state in the U.S. Some of the most famous include the Big Sable Point Lighthouse on Lake Michigan and the Whitefish Point Lighthouse on Lake Superior. On their practical use, these structures symbolize Michigan's deep connection to the Great Lakes. Whether perched on rocky islands or nestled along sandy shores, each lighthouse tells a unique story of sailors, storms, and survival. Today, they remain enduring landmarks, preserving the state's rich maritime heritage and offering breathtaking views of Michigan's vast freshwater seas. And there you have it. 25 mind-blowing U.S. geography facts that you can showcase at your next gathering. Which fact blew your mind the most? Let me know in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed these bite-sized geography facts about the United States, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another crazy fact-filled video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.